General Kellogg, thanks for joining us. Appreciate your time. Earlier today, Steve Witkoff meeting with President Putin in Russia. What is it that we want Russia to agree to?
Well, Sean, thanks for having me, by the way. Look, what we've been trying to get to is a comprehensive ceasefire to basically stop the killing, as President Trump has wanted even since the campaign. And so we're trying to get an agreement on both sides, both the Ukrainian and the Russian. We're okay on the Ukrainian side. The Ukrainians have come down with what we call a term sheet, basically a memorandum of understanding of what they want or don't want. And so we know we've got them in what I would call in the box. And now Steve's role is to get the Russians, President Putin, in the box as well. And once we get to that, we get to a comprehensive ceasefire defined as air, sea, land, infrastructure, no civilian targets. Then we're kind of off to the races because there will be a second step. The second step is, okay, come down with a peace plan, a long-term peace plan with security guarantees for the Ukrainians as well. So it's a step-by-step process. I'm very comfortable with the Ukrainians, where we're at with them. We spent a lot of time in Ukraine, and Steve's got his lane, which is the Russia lane, and then we work together to make sure it's done right.
Can we trust Russia? I mean, if they tell us that they'll do a ceasefire, I don't feel like they're very trustworthy, that they are seemingly trying to get there. Like Donald Trump, President Trump, has done everything, I think, to get a lasting peace. This is right. But the question I have is, do we think the Russians actually want that? And if they say they do, can we trust them?
Well, it's a fair question. And I think you're looking at different leaders, different presidents. Trump is a different type of president than Biden was. And I think Putin has a level of respect for President Trump. And we saw that, as you well recall, from the first Trump administration, where he had this good relationship. And I say good in the sense there was a dialogue with Putin. And there was a guy who said, okay, we can kind of work together on this. And I saw that through numerous conversations that President Trump in the first administration had with Putin. So I think that level of agreement of working together is critical. And I think that Putin appreciates that. You know, remember, Biden didn't even pick up the phone and call Putin. At least Trump has. And I think that relationship is going to be critical. Now, you always have to, remember what President Reagan said, trust but verify. And I think that is going to be critical as well. So do you have a level of confidence that this will work? Well, you got to be an optimist about it and see where it's going to go. The losses on the Russian side, and both economic and military and diplomatic, are enormous. And if he wants, meaning Putin, if he wants to come into the League of Nations again, then he's going to have to come down with some type of peace plan and negotiation, working with Ukraine. Otherwise, he's just basically going to kill himself with the European nations, any type of integration. He's going to cause a problem with long-term with India, with Turkey, as well as with India. And does he want to go there? He's now become, when you look at this relationship, and it's a global relationship he has with the Chinese and also with the North Koreans, they're really the junior partner. They're not the primary partner when it comes to China. And so I think he wants to make sure that relationship stays strong. He's got about as much he's going to get out of this thing with Ukraine right now. When he's focused on not just Crimea, take that one, put that one on the side. But when you look up by the four, what they call oblasts, we would call them states. When you talk about Luhansk, Donetsk, Kherson, and Zaporizhia, he's kind of got about as much territory as he's going to get. I mean, they're gaining territory now in meters, not miles. And does he want to keep doing what he's doing at an enormous cost, both economic cost and also a manpower cost? He's lost conservatively, and President Trump tweeted about that the other day. He's lost over 1 million soldiers dead or wounded. That is a number that is staggering. When you think about what the Soviet Union did in Afghanistan, they lost 18,000 dead and left. And we have the same kind of look. When you look what we did in Vietnam, we lost about 68,000 dead and we left. And so the cost to him, the return on investment, isn't there anymore. So I think he's got to be thinking that. I would assume that a lot of his senior officials, both diplomatic and military, are saying, okay, we've kind of extended this as far as we're going to go. They're not going to take all of Ukraine. They're not going to get to Kyiv. they're not going to cross the Dnieper River, which is a natural boundary. So you want to kind of say to them, okay, enough is enough. You kind of need to stop this because it's damaging to them, both economically and politically, when you see what's happening in Western Europe, as well as what's happened to him on a military basis.
Hey guys, I hope you're enjoying this conversation, but if you're looking for a way to get to sleep tonight and stay asleep, I've got the answer for you. For over a year, I've been taking Beam's Dream Powder. It has made a world of difference. I fall asleep faster, I stay asleep, and I wake up ready to go. If you want to join me by taking one scoop every night before you get to bed, go to shopbeam.com/Spicer. Use code word Spicer at checkout for up to 40% off. Trust me, everything stems from a great night's sleep. Go to shopbeam.com/Spicer, code word Spicer. All right, back to the conversation. And don't fall asleep yet. So this week's, there's a deadline that the president has moved up to enact some of these economic sanctions that would obviously have a penalty. What's on the table? Because it seems like there's trade, some de minimis amount still. There's these secondary tariffs that he's imposed on India. But there's also a lot of stuff that, let's face it, the Biden administration could have done where we've looked the other way on some of the things that Russia has done in terms of how it trades. It foreign flags ships, things like that, so that it kind of flies under the radar. Are we prepared to go to the mat and have the State Department really ratchet up some of these economic sanctions, secondary sanctions, et cetera, that really, frankly, the Biden administration turned a blind eye on in the past?
Yeah. Well, I know there's discussions right now, and you know from being in the White House before, the president will make those decisions. That's why he's the president of the United States. But it's a whole of government effort right now. What I mean, and you mentioned Sec State with Secretary Rubio, but you're also looking at Treasury with Bessent because a lot of those sanctions come under Bessent. You're looking at Defense Department as well because if you enforce, you mentioned the shadow fleet, which 90% of the illicit oil that comes out of Russia is moved through what's called the shadow fleet. Most of those are foreign flagged. They're not flagged by Russia. For example, we've sanctioned under Treasury over 200 of them. Only 66 are Russian flagged. So there's a lot of foreign flagged vessels that are basically in bad repair. And since it comes through the Baltic, that kind of cuts through a lot of NATO nations. So you're looking at a whole of government approach to seeing who's going to do what to whom. And that's a decision that'll be made by the president. And he will be given options by his national security advisor, Marco Rubio, and his Secretary of State, Marco Rubio, and the vice president as well. And then he will make those calls. That's what he does. That's, his right. He's been elected president. None of us got on a single electoral college vote. We give him the options and let it go from there. But you're right about one thing. I remember what Secretary Bessent said early on in the administration. If you look at sanctions rated in 1 to 10, 1 being like none and 10 being hard, we're probably at about a 6. But if you look at enforcement, we're probably at about a level 3. But that has been by choice. But that's the president's call. And we'll see where he goes on Friday.
Is he, from a mindset, General, I feel like President Trump came into office and said, all right, Putin, you did all this under Biden. Biden was weak. Biden was feckless. I get it. You got away with it. But Donald Trump doesn't put up with this crap like others do. And he gave him, in my words, not anyone else's, a sort of a longer leash, some runway to say, all right, let's cut it out. Let's stop this right now. And to your point, it seems like he gave him that opportunity. I get the sense from some of his rhetoric that he said he has now gotten to the point where he's saying, I'm going to ratchet this up. I've given you an opportunity, Putin. You haven't taken it. Now I'm going to show you that I can play tough negotiator. The businessman in me is going to come out. And it sounds like, to your point about what Bessent has said, the enforcement mechanism that might be at a 3 is now going to go to a 7 or an 8. Is that fair?
Yeah, I think that's a fair assessment. But, Sean, and you've been with the president. I told everybody early on, if you really want to know the president, I think he's very transparent.
Yeah.
And read his books, especially The Art of the Deal, #1.
I love you saying that. I say the same thing. It's like it's all right there.
It is. And I said, nobody should be surprised how he negotiates, no one at all, or how he's done it. I mean, I just reread Art of the Deal to make sure, why have I missed anything? But he's done that in his other books as well. He he knows how to negotiate. He knows how to make deals, and he's just following through on what he's doing. And again, what I see with him is everything he's done historically. And go back to the war, which is the largest war in Europe since World War II. But he inherited this war. This was not his war that started. It started under Obama in 2014 when Russia took Crimea. And then you look what happened when Biden made a comment, well, maybe a marginal incursion may be okay. He said that in a press conference. Well, with me and knowing Putin, knowing him since by studying him, to me, a minor incursion is significantly different than Putin's interpretation of a minor incursion. And so we see that. And President Trump inherited this fight and inherited this war in the European continent. He has pushed the Europeans to take a lot more responsibility for it, and they have. When you look at Secretary Rutte, the Secretary General of NATO, he's really moved forward on it. They've done a lot more with the European Union and NATO as well on supplying Ukraine and stepping up to the tasks they have at hand. And he even acknowledged that when we went to the NATO conference, that he's seen the NATO nations actually pick up the steps and actually doing a lot more. So I think that's important. So, in the first administration, remember when we used to criticize NATO for not doing enough. Well, now they've kind of said, well, we're going to do a lot more, and give them credit for that. But I also credit President Trump for kind of forcing that issue and enforcing it from not this administration, but the previous administration. And I think the end result shows. And that's the reason I believe he's got so much respect from those leaders over there, be it Starmer of the UK or Merz of Germany or Meloni in Italy. They're all kind of saying, okay, we're following this guy. He's the leader of the free world. And it's because of who he is and what he's done. But it goes back to his style of negotiating. It doesn't surprise me at all what he's doing.
Last thing I want to ask you, we talked about the economic stuff. Let's talk about the military for a second. There's reports out that we may kind of create some kind of fund that the Europeans could pay into that would allow weapons to be transferred. But regardless of that piece of it, is President Trump in his conversations beyond the economic front willing to discuss what it's going to take for Ukraine to have the weaponry it needs to not just defend itself, but maybe go on the offense and attack Russia to stop this on it? So I guess the question I'm asking is take the economic stuff off the table for a second. Are we willing to give them the military mechanism, regardless of the funding piece of this, to win this war?
Well, winning is in the eye of the beholder. What we have done is we've supplied them a lot of kit, U.S. kit. And part of that is because U.S. equipment is the best in the world. I mean, when you look, let's just use the Patriot system. The Patriot system is without question the best anti-ballistic missile system there is. The Europeans have two different systems out there, but they always default to the Patriot. We want to buy U.S. kit because it's so good, be it a Patriot system or be it an F-16. So we have provided a lot, and the Europeans are providing a lot. I think what they're trying to get to is status quo, a basis on where they want to go to. And the fight of Ukraine is going to be their fight. We're trying to say, look, this is a time to kind of step back, see what you're going to be doing, and talking to President Zelenskyy and his staff that's there as well. Very honestly, for them to kind of throw the Russians out of, let's just use one of the oblasts, out of Luhansk, which they occupy about 98%, the Russians, it would take an enormous effort to do that. They don't have the manpower to do it. They also don't have the kit to do it. They last tried to do an offense about a year ago in the vicinity of Kherson, and to get to the Sea of Azov, and they didn't have the combat power to punch through, because you basically need a 3-to-1 advantage in troops in kit to make a solid effort in the offense, and they don't have the manning to do that. They just don't. They can fight defensively quite well, but I'm just speaking from a military perspective. Based on my experience, what it takes to kind of go on the offensive to do something, that is really hard to do. And I don't know if they were willing to pay that price to do it. It's one of those you kind of have to say to them, where do you want to go with this?
But are we willing to help? Like, I guess I get your strategic point, but I guess my question is, when President Trump talks to you about options, is one of them, hey, what more can we do for them militarily?
Well, we've done a lot. Well, I don't think we can do much more. It's going to be up to the Europeans to provide that. Okay. And the Europeans can provide it. When you look at our U.S. kit, which we've provided in great numbers, we also want to make sure that we've maintained our readiness as well. And so what you don't want to do, you don't want to draw down your stockage to a level that makes it really hard. And, when you think about our defense industrial base, it's really not designed to basically fight more than one war at one time. We used to have what we used to call a 2.5 strategy. You could fight two wars near simultaneously, one in Pacific, one in Europe, and then a 0.5 was a contingency environment. We drew that down years ago to 1.0 strategy. And because of that, the defense industrial base reduced their outflow. So the defense industrial base is working on a peacetime schedule of what they're providing and what they're building. So you can't automatically ramp that up. So the defense industrial base needs to be looked at as well, and which we're doing. Pete Hegseth is looking at that, and I know the national security teams are looking at that. How can we improve that? Because you can't keep providing kit if you're not replacing it for your own kit as well. And that's something we have to look at, and they do look at. But I think President Trump understands that quite well, and he's been getting good advice from his Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State, the Vice President, and his National Security Advisor.
Well, and I know he's getting it from you as well, General Kellogg. Thank you for being with us. I really appreciate what you're doing and your continued service to this country and to President Trump and the team. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks for having me.
You bet. Well, if you enjoyed this content, make sure to like this video, subscribe, and click the notification bell to get more.